Chemosh, god of the Moabites, had been completely without worshippers for at least the last 2,000 years. At one time all the people of Moab, that little country on the eastern shore of the Dead Sea, often obscure, but now and then the terror of Edom, Ammon, and even ancient Israel, had bowed and groveled before Chemosh, sacrificing goats, captured enemies, and even their own children to a fiery statue of Chemosh. But the old days were not only gone, but long forgotten, except by Chemosh. After the Moabites lost their faith and went after strange gods like Baal and Jesus, Chemosh had found new employment in hell. It had been billed as the land of opportunity, but Chemosh was quite a minor god, and rather lacking in initiative as well, and soon settled for a job as a stoker in the furnace room of hell, shoveling coal into the great fireboxes that kept hell cozy warm for demons and damned souls. Chemosh was 12 feet tall, horns included, and had muscles like lumps of pig iron beneath his beet-red skin, so he was ideal for such brute work, freeing up more delicate fiends for jobs in accounting and public relations. It was not such bad work. He got Mondays and Thursdays off, and all the coal he could use, and a little cave in the suburbs of Pandemonium, staffed by several 18th century English footmen, and by a former chef of the Emperor Nero, who had helped his imperial master poison several guests before being poisoned himself. Still, after having been a god, even over a nation of outcasts, it was something of a come-down. One morning Chemosh was shoveling coal when Satan entered the great furnace room. Satan strode along a high catwalk, his frock coat billowing in the currents of hot air that blew from below. Leaning over the rail and holding on to his top hat, he cried, "Hey, Chemosh!" Chemosh looked up. "Chemosh," Satan said, "you're not going to believe this. You've got a worshipper again." Chemosh dropped his shovel, scattering coal across the floor. "That's right, you're a full-fledged god again. Now listen, I want you to go up to the surface world and find this new devotee, and see if you can make some more converts. I'll tell you what, if you can get a good congregation going, you can stay up there and be their god." Chemosh wasted no time. He went home and put on his best loincloth, borrowed a current world atlas from the Hell Public Library, and headed up the 666,000 steps to the surface. He took the Moab exit, and soon, for the first time in 20 centuries, Chemosh stood in his native land. It was desert. There were no vineyards, no sacred groves, no fields of grain. The streams were dry wadis. Of the towns, not even fallen stones remained. Chemosh was puzzled. Perhaps he was in the wrong place. He began to walk, wandering over the rocky desert. Reaching the crest of a line of hills, he saw the Dead Sea, calm and shimmering, to the west and far below. This must be Moab, for that beautiful, desolate view had not changed. He looked east and saw the King's Highway, the ancient trail from Arabia to Syria that ran through Moab and had brought it wealth. A camel caravan was making its tortuous way along the trail. Chemosh tried to intercept it, striding across the desert and thundering in Moabite. The Arabs took him for an evil jinn and urged their camels on. He quit the pursuit, thinking they must not be Moabites if they fled from his promises of wealth and of protection from the Ammonites. Chemosh made his way down toward the Dead Sea. Near the shore was a camp with several tents. Coming closer, he saw men sifting the soil, picking at bits of pottery and bronze as if they had found gold. They were definitely not Moabites. Chemosh was almost upon them before one looked up, monocle flashing beneath a pith helmet. "I say," the man gasped in English, "it's a giant Homo heidelbergensis! Run for your lives!" Now English is the unofficial language of hell. With a bit of every language in it, it is hard to master but easy to pidgin. And Chemosh had learned it well enough over the centuries. Ignoring the screams, which faded as the archaeologists fled, he ripped apart a tent. Inside were their records and journals, and newspapers from Britain. It was the year 1870 there. Reading, Chemosh wondered if these foreigners might have something to do with the revival of his worship. Sidney Phipps wore checkered trousers to the party. All the richest and most consciously outrageous bohemians were there, a funhouse mirror reflection of polite London society. He gave his coat to a chimpanzee footman whom the host had bought cheaply from a circus after a most embarrassing and fatal incident. The ape took the coat with teeth bared and tossed it on the cloakroom floor. Phipps hurried on. In the drawing room, dozens of guests mingled, drinking and chatting, guffawing women and preening men, trading jokes that in other circles would only have been reluctantly described as indiscreet. Phipps soon found himself listening to Major Sketcher's story of having escaped the Battle of Balaclava by hiding in a steamer trunk. It was much like any Major's war story, except for the cowardice, which made him celebrated at such parties and a favorite of the women. One of them asked Phipps about his own activities, words of which had been getting around. "Oh, it's my latest venture into the esoteric and grotesque," Phipps said, "separating myself even further from the common herd, the abominable rabble of C of E and Tractarians and, my God, Methodists, who ran on and on about the same old God they've been worshipping since they were dunked in the font. Well, I was lazing about in the British Library and was fortunate enough to find the most divine book, pun intended as you'll see, about forgotten gods and goddesses. Well, I dug up one hoary old god who must not have been kowtowed to in 1,000 years. Chemosh, they called him, and decided right then and there I'd bring his naughty old cult back to life. Oh, you must come over and worship him. It's marvelous fun. I had to invent half the ceremonies. All that ill-advised training for the collar up at Oxford helped, you know. Lots of hocus-pocus and half the shall-nots in the OT. I guess you could call me his high priest. Well, I'm having a little pagan soiree late tonight if you want to come. Bring everyone. Chemosh loves a crowd, so the book said. And do bring a little sacrifice that we can burn on his altar. A little young asparagus, or maybe some truffles." Chemosh strode the deserted Bedford Square, confused by the Georgian facades. They had a certain brutality in their codestone archways and their chimney pots like rows of teeth, but not one house suggested a temple of Chemosh. In fact, he had seen nothing familiar since he arrived in this strange city of unbelievers. No place could be less like the Moab of old. Yet Chemosh felt the presence of his worshipper. He was here, in one of these houses. In only one house did lights still burn brightly. Chemosh peeked through a gap in the curtains. Phipps and his friends were bowed before a huge idol of Chemosh, which reached the ceiling of the ornate drawing room. Phipps raised his arms in praise, grinning as he mouthed some incantation. Vegetables smoldered on a brazier before the idol. Chemosh knocked at the door. Eager to present himself to Phipps and be worshipped in person, he grabbed the doorknob. It broke off in his giant hand, and the lock fell to pieces. Chemosh squeezed into the hall, knocking paintings from the walls and entangling his horns in a crystal chandelier. By now there were frightened voices in the next room. Chemosh stuck his head through this doorway to reassure them that it was only their god. His booming Moaglish patois, intended to ingratiate, was answered with screams. A guards officer fainted. Sidney Phipps soiled himself, and there was a general rush for every door and window. Chemosh appealed for calm and good English, but the room was soon empty save for the officer sprawled on the carpet and one man who was stuck in the flue of the disused fireplace. Chemosh clenched his teeth as a doctor pulled bullets from his thick red hide. "Well, well," Satan chuckled, lounging in one of Chemosh's armchairs. "I'm afraid the days of real, honest-to-God's paganism are either gone for good or just not ready for a revival yet." As Chemosh showed no inclination to be amused, Satan rose, adding, "Well, Chemosh, I kept your job open. Get well soon. The fires of hell haven't been the same without you."